welcome to a live recording of Fruitloops episode 138. 'Tis the season for scaring the shit out of you. So happy Halloween and thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, thank you. And just as an FYI, this podcast contains adult themes and language, and some of the things that we discuss may be disturbing to some listeners. In this podcast, we discuss sexual assault, torture, race, and murder. So listener discretion is advised.
Hide your kids. No, Fruitloops is a podcast about true crimes committed by people of color and the victims that we don't hear or know much about. Contrary to popular belief, not all serial killers are straight, cis, able-bodied white dudes.
What?
No, I'm telling, and I am telling you. Now, there are many well-documented cases of serial killers of color, and Fruitloops is a podcast all about them. We will take deep dives into the fascinating lives and crimes of serial killers and true crimes committed by people of color and the victims that the media and entertainment commonly leave out because the news is racist. Say it with me. Just kidding. Allegedly.
And we are Wendy and Beth. She's Wendy, a Black Latinx woman, and I'm Beth, and I just happen to be white.
It's not her fault.
We're not journalists, investigators, or psychologists, just a couple of gals interested in true crime. Also, the opinions expressed in this podcast are just that, our opinions. Please send any questions or comments to fruitloopspod@gmail.com or leave us a voicemail at 602-935-6294, and we may feature it on a future episode.
Also, our website is fruitloopspod.com, and we use FruitLoopsPod for all our social media. The footnotes for each episode can be found on our website. Plus, check it out for the different ways that you can support the show and become a Fruitloops patron. So, who are we talking about today, Beth?
Well, today we're talking about the Texarkana Moonlight Murders, Texas's most infamous unsolved murders. In 1946, an unidentified assailant was stalking and killing the residents of Texarkana. 5 people were killed and 3 were wounded. This story was researched by our new researcher, Maria. Welcome to the Fruit Loops team, Maria.
Yes, hip hop air horns for Maria.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Maria. So, before we get into it, how you doing?
I'm doing good. It's great to be here at She Podcasts Live.
Mhm.
It's a great event, very organized.
Oh my God, the most organized. This is the best live event I've ever been to in my
Yeah.
entire life.
Yes, it's pretty awesome. So yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, agreed. We made it, feeling good. Great to be here live. What else can I say? Besides it being a very well-run event because it's run by women and we do amazing things, we saw Javelina last night.
Yeah.
And I've lived
outside of our room.
I know. At first, I thought it was a goat. And Beth right away, because she's been here a long time, goes, "Oh, look at that cute little javelina." First of all, what I know is that javelinas are dangerous. And Beth, you were just over there like, "Oh, he's so cute." And I'm like just waiting for him to attack somebody, like
Just to
waiting
eat
for
bite at
blood
our
and guts
ankles
to
or
be
something.
flying everywhere. And he eventually left and disappeared into the night. But that was
It was pretty cool.
exciting.
Yeah.
Well, normally we would get into the listener letter portion of our show at this point, followed by a sound effect. Here we go.
Hello, angels. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Now, as I said, we usually take this time to read some listener letters and thank our Patreon supporters for give them a personal shout out tune. But since we are here at She Podcasts Live, and our patrons also helped get us here, we wanted to thank all of you here and our patrons at home for all the She Podcast possibilities that have come to fruition today. So this song is dedicated to all of you. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. It's close to midnight. Something evil's lurking in the dark. We're in pajamas. We see the sight that almost starts your heart. You hear it chord, but terror takes a sign before you make it. Yeah. You call support. They tell you that there's nothing they can do. Try to reboot. Cause this she podcasts. She podcasts live. And no one's gonna stop us from potting here tonight. Yeah, this she podcast. Woo-hoo. Podcast live. You're fighting for your life inside a killer thriller tonight. Okay, very
I
off
love
key.
it.
Very sorry, but thank you. So, okay, back to it. Now, Beth, remind us who's our subject today after all that foolishness.
Today we're talking about the Texarkana Moonlight Murders. This story inspired the cult classic horror film, The Town That Dreaded Sundown. The tagline for the film was, quote, "In 1946, this man killed 5 people. Today, he still lurks the streets of Texarkana, Arkansas."
Santa Maria. Oh my God. Well, all right, let's get into some stats. Okay. The Phantom Killer, aka the Moonlight Murderer, aka the Texarkana Murderer, aka the Texarkana Moonlight Murders, aka the Phantom Slayer case takes place in 1946 in, you guessed it, Texarkana, Texas. Can you believe it, girls? There were eight victims and 5 murder victims, 3 survivors. The murder victims are, rest in power, y'all, Betty Jo Booker was 15, Paul Martin 16, Richard Griffin 29, Polly Ann Moore 17, and Virgil Starks 37. They were all killed by gunshot. And the survivors were Jimmy Hollis 25, Mary Jean LeRae 19, and Katie Starks 36. Now, the perpetrator was never identified or caught. His MO was to stalk and ambush the victims. He wore a white hood / pillowcase, who knows? It was a white cloth over his head with the eyes cut out. He attacked unsuspecting couples of men and women, and he used a gun he used the gun for it was a multi-purpose gun. He beat people with it, he sexually assaulted people with it, and he shot his victims with it. And only one surviving victim described the perp as black. In any case, it appears that it was a man, and it's impossible to know for sure, but he might still be alive to this day. We don't know. So, Beth, now it's time for the setting. Take us there.
The setting is Texarkana, which is located on Caddo Native American territory. The Caddo inhabited what we know today as East Texas, southern Arkansas, and Oklahoma. They lived in earthwork mounds and have a history dating back to 800 CE, aka AD.
Wait a minute. What CE AD? What? What do you mean?
CE means common era.
Oh, okay. Does that just take out the Christianity part of it?
Yes.
Okay. Now, as white settlers moved into the East to settle the area, enslaved people were also brought in, and Native Americans were pushed out. By the 19th century, the Caddo had left the area, first living in Louisiana, then later in Texas and Oklahoma.
The last of the settlements, Caddo Hadacho Village, was abandoned around the year 1778. Caddo people today speak of themselves as being Caddo Hadacho or Hasina, meaning, quote, our people, unquote. As of 2017, they are approximately 6,000 members strong.
The area that would later become Texarkana lay on the Southwest Trail, a 19th century pioneer route that was the primary passageway for American settlers bound for Texas. The Southwest Trail became a major immigration route in the 1820s. By the 1830s, more than 80% of the Arkansas Territory population had entered through that Southwest Trail.
Texarkana has an interesting history. It was founded in 1873 at a railroad junction, and there are actually 2 Texarkanas. One half is in Texas and the other half is in Arkansas. The name is a portmanteau of Texas, Arkansas, and nearby Louisiana.
Portmanteau means mix.
Yes.
Okay, these twin cities of Texarkana have their own separate municipalities, but share a federal building that straddles the state line. The only federal building in the U.S. to do so. Wow, hip hop air horns. It
Yeah.
is also located on the aptly named State Line Avenue, a road that follows approximately 11 miles of the Arkansas state line, dividing the two cities.
Texarkana began as a railroad and lumber center and was a junction which connected 9 railway systems.
Mm.
Early on, Texarkana was a frontier boomtown with all the lawlessness that comes with that. There were saloons, gambling halls, and brothels aplenty.
Mm. In late May 1880, racial unrest, often described as Texarkana's race riot, erupted in Texarkana. It should be noted that this was 15 years after slavery ended and just 3 years after Reconstruction failed. So tension had been brewing for a very long time
Yeah.
between black and white folks. And according to newspaper reports, the trouble started as a land dispute between a black man identified only as Dr. Cromwell and a white railroad worker named Connor.
Cromwell and Connor owned adjoining land, and Dr. Cromwell, who was black, had built a fence on Connor's property. Connor tore up the fence, and Cromwell responded by attacking Connor with a club. Connor's wife heard the attack and ran out to give her husband a gun. Connor shot at Cromwell and missed, and Cromwell escaped. He was later arrested, but was freed on bond.
So the next day, Cromwell was accused of attacking Connor's wife. Where the hell did that story come from? Quote, tearing her clothing literally off, unquote. But her screams roused the neighbors and he fled. He was again arrested, and the sheriff, fearing trouble, hid him in an unknown location. So welcome to Culture Corner. This is a racist tale as old as time. Now, the protection of white womanhood has been used as a means to justify violence and murder of black lives throughout history. The story never has to be true, though, to result in a truly deadly and dangerous situation for any black person in proximity to a white person who has the power to lynch them and believes the story.
Yeah, I kind of think the story was probably bullshit.
Agreed.
Yeah. That night, between 30 and 60 white men, not knowing that Cromwell had been moved, descended on the jail intending to lynch him. Black men also descended on the jail in an attempt to defend him. As you might expect, this did not go well.
Members of the white mob began shooting at any black person that they encountered. No white men were injured, but it was reported that 5 black people were wounded, with 3 expected to die.
The next day, there was a rumor that a large number of black men were coming to the town from the nearby countryside, and that they were threatening to burn down the Arkansas side of Texarkana. White residents armed themselves in preparation for the attack, but no attack materialized.
So they're all just chilling there with their pitchforks.
They're like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God.
Yeah. Oh, man. So the last lynching in Texarkana was in the early 1940s when a black man accused of raping a white woman was dragged down the Broad Street and hanged. Another thing that should be mentioned about this constant story that never has to be true, but is used often in before the incitement of violence, is that white men are also afraid that black people will do to them what they have done to other people. So just let that sink in. But anyway, so the FBI investigated this, but surprisingly, or not, the murderers were never publicly identified.
In the 1940s, the population of Texarkana was estimated to be around 17,000 people, with almost half the population being black citizens. Between 1940 and 1950, the town's population boomed due to the production of bullets at the Lone Star Army ammunition plant for World War II efforts, creating jobs.
But Texarkana was segregated. Separate schools had been established for black and white students on both sides of the state line, with black schools adhering to rules and budgets set by school boards with no black members. So
Jeez.
how can you govern us?
How can you
without letting us be a part of these conversations? So Texas also operated But boy, oh boy, Texas. Am I right? So
Yeah.
Texas also operated the city's only higher education institution, Texarkana Junior College, which only served white students.
In 1952, 2 years before Brown versus Board of Education, 9 black students from Dunbar High School sued Texarkana College, claiming their admission to the college was denied solely because of race.
The suit was dismissed in 1955, nearly a year after the Brown v. Board of Education U.S. Supreme Court decision. One of the arguments for dismissal was that black schools did not produce, oh boy, students on par with the white schools, and therefore could not produce students fit for admittance to white
But
colleges.
that's so messed up.
It is, and it's in writing. It's black and white.
Yeah,
People can
yeah.
go back and see
And
who
read
said
that.
that. Yeah.
That decision was nullified and reversed on appeal, but it wasn't until September 10th, 1956, that black students first attempted to enter the campus. As the 2 lone black students attempted to enter the building, they were continuously blocked as a crowd of white people formed a wall between them and the entrance.
All they wanted to do was go to school and get an
Yeah.
education. Pretty benign, unwarranted of such violence and
Yes.
anger.
Yes.
Now, the white people hurled racial insults and began to threaten violence. So the 2 students left. 4 Texas Rangers and 2 local police officers were present, but would not escort the students into the school because, quote, Rangers were under strict orders to stay out of the integration dispute. Shouldn't have been a dispute because the Supreme Court said, fuck out of here. So the 2 students never came back. And it wasn't until June 12th, 1963, that Texarkana College was officially desegregated.
Here's a fun fact about Texarkana.
Ooh.
Composer and pianist Scott Joplin, aka the King of Ragtime, grew up in Texarkana.
Ah.
Among the popular ragtime compositions by Joplin are "The Entertainer" and "The Maple Leaf Rag."
No way.
Yeah.
Everybody knows The Entertainer,
Yeah.
except I can't think of it right now. Sing it. Yes. So in Texarkana, there is an annual showing of the 1976 movie based on the murders called The Town That Dreaded Sundown. There was also a 2014 remake of the same film. I saw it and I liked it. Highly fictionalized, the Phantom Killer in these films had a hook a la Candyman style, but was portrayed by Bud Davis. I mean, Bud, not Bud. Bud Davis, a white man. Now, welcome to Culture Corner with Wendy and Beth. The Town That Dreaded Sundown is an ironic and interesting name for a serial murder case that took place in Texas in the midst of Jim Crow.
Yeah.
A sundown town is an all-white municipality or neighborhood in the United States that practices a form of racial segregation by excluding non-whites via some combination of discriminatory laws, intimidation, or violence. I'm doing a commercial for it. The term came from the signs posted that colored people had to leave by sundown. The practice was not restricted to the southern states, so we see you as at least until the early 1960s. Northern states could be nearly as inhospitable to black travelers as states like Alabama or Georgia. Now, we couldn't find any sources stating for sure that Texarkana was in fact a sundown town. We know that the population was historically 50% black and white, but we can only speculate. However, Scottsdale, where we're sitting right now, was in fact a sundown town. We seen to you, Scottsdale. We seen to you. So now we're going to get into the alleged Texarkana Moonlight Murderers' early life. What do you got, Beth? Anything?
Well, normally, as you said, we would discuss the killer's early life and what may have led him or her to commit the crimes. But the killer in this case is unknown. There were some suspects, however, and we'll get into them later.
All right, timeline time. Hit it, Beth.
The year was 1946. Jimmy Hollis, who was 25, and Mary Jean Larry, 19, had begun dating early in the year. And on February 22nd, they went on a double date with Jimmy's brother Bob and his girlfriend.
I didn't realize that it's Valentine's time.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Valentine's Day time. Whatever.
Yeah.
It's a season of love.
Yes.
After dinner and a movie, the couple dropped Bob and his date off at their respective homes and then drove to an isolated, secluded road to park. They got there at about 11:45 p.m. and were at the spot for about 10 minutes when Jimmy got out of the car to look at the stars.
Suddenly, a man shined a flashlight in his face. Jimmy could not see the man because of the light, and he was at first very confused, thinking that this was some kind of a prank. When he realized that the man had a pistol pointed at him, it dawned on him that this was no joke.
The man said, quote, "I don't want to kill you, fellow, so do what I say," unquote. He then told Jimmy to take off his pants. Although still confused, Jimmy did as he was told, but the man pistol whipped him anyway.
He hit Jimmy in the head so hard, and the resulting sound was so loud that initially Mary Jean thought he'd been shot. But the sound was of Jimmy's skull being fractured. Mary had by that time gotten out of the car, retrieved Jimmy's wallet from his pants, and offered it to the man, indicating that there was no money.
The man said he didn't believe her and demanded her purse. Mary told him that she had no purse. The man said he didn't believe her. So many lies. And also hit her, either with the gun or the flashlight. She fell to the ground, but was able to get up.
The man then ordered Mary to run. She ran in one direction, but the man then demanded that she run in a different direction, so she did. He then caught up with her and tackled her to the ground. Then he asked her why she ran.
Yeah, if it wasn't such a terrible real thing, you would think this was a movie, a scene out of a movie.
This is ridiculous.
Yeah. So the masked man proceeded to sexually assault her with the barrel of a gun. But after a few seconds, he apparently was startled by some passing headlights and he fled. Mary Jean got up and ran to a nearby home, pleading with the occupants to call the police. Meanwhile, Jimmy managed to get up and flag down a car.
The occupants of the car would not allow Jimmy to get in, but said that they would find a phone and call an ambulance. But because Mary had already gotten help, an ambulance arrived shortly after Jimmy had flagged down the car.
Jimmy spent 12 days in the hospital, and he and Mary Jean lived to give their accounts to the police. Mary Jean told police that her attacker was a light-skinned black man with a white bag over his head, something like a pillowcase with holes cut out for eyes.
When Jimmy regained consciousness after about a week in a coma, and he was well enough to speak to police, he told police that he believed the attacker had been a white man, about 30 years old. But he admitted that he only had a vague recollection of events.
I was going to mention this only just popped into my head that sometimes black people who are light-skinned pass for white.
Yeah.
But to the untrained eye, look white.
Yeah.
For example, I think Meghan Markle, is a good example for somebody who passes. Not everybody realized that she was black.
I don't think I did realize that she was black until later. Yeah.
See, to the untrained eye, her edges give her away every time. I'm just saying. Now, because the accounts varied and with the strange addition of the white bag with eye holes, police were suspicious of the couple and thought that perhaps they actually knew the man and were keeping it a secret. But after investigating and finding no viable suspects, police and the public gravitated toward Mary Jean's account at the time. Of course they did.
Just about a month later, Richard Griffin, 29, and Polly Ann Moore, 17, who had been dating for about 6 weeks, spent the evening of March 23rd at a cafe having dinner with Richard's sister and her boyfriend. Richard was a World War II veteran and a carpenter. Polly had just graduated from high school the year before and was living in a boarding house. The age difference these days, he was 29, she was 17, would definitely be an issue, but back in 1946, this was not unusual.
Now, the next morning, on March 24th, 1946, at about 8:30 a.m., a motorist was driving on Ridge Road, known as a lover's lane, and noticed Richard's 1941 Oldsmobile parked on the side of the road. He stopped and looked inside the car and saw two people inside. At first, he thought they were sleeping, and then he realized that something wasn't right.
The man inside the car was kneeling between the front seats, and the woman in the back was face down. There was also blood. The motorist called it into the police.
When police arrived, they soon realized that the couple had each been shot in the back of the head, execution style. It was Richard and Polly. Richard was later identified by the vehicle, and Polly was identified by a class ring she wore engraved with her initials.
Richard's pockets had been turned inside out, and he'd actually been shot twice. Polly Ann had been shot once, and she'd been sexually assaulted. Blood was found inside the car, but also outside the car, congealed on a patch of grass.
I love the word congealed. Anyway, a 32 shell casing, possibly from a Colt pistol, was also found on the scene. Police believe the couple was shot outside of the vehicle and then placed back into the vehicle post-mortem. Footprints were found near the crime scene, presumed to be the killers, but frustratingly, the footprints were washed away that night by a rainstorm.
Police offered a $500 reward for the killer, but all that did was lead to 100 plus false leads. 3 suspects were brought in for having bloody clothing, but all 3 were cleared. Public panic began to set in, and people began patrolling lovers' lanes.
Yeah, one source said police were doing it, those Texas Rangers, as well as vigilantes.
Yes.
Which that's enough to keep me very far away from any area. So the following month, on April 12th, 1946, Betty Jo Booker, 15, performed on her saxophone with the band The Rhythmaires at the Veterans Hall. Beatty had plans after the gig to meet up with Paul Martin, who was 16, a friend since kindergarten. Paul had relocated to another town with his family, but was spending the weekend in Texarkana hanging out with friends.
Betty Jo was last seen getting into Paul's car around 1:30 a.m. on April 13th. Neither made it home. Paul's body was found about 6:30 a.m. along a rural road, having been shot multiple times. Betty was nowhere to be found.
A search party was put together, and Betty's body was eventually found behind a tree around 11:30 a.m., about 2 miles away from where Paul had been found. She had been raped and shot twice. Paul's 1946 Club Coupe, with the keys still in the ignition, was found nearly 3 miles away.
Both had been shot with a .32 caliber gun, presumably a Colt, as was allegedly used in the first attack, but was also a very common gun at the time. Betty's saxophone was missing. It was thought that the killer had stolen the saxophone, and a man who tried to sell a saxophone about a week later in a music store in Corpus Christi became a suspect.
He was arrested and found with bloody clothing, but no saxophone. He was later cleared. Several months later, the saxophone was found in the woods nearby where Betty's body had been found.
After Betty's and Paul's murders, the community really began to freak out. Rumors and gossip flew, which hindered the investigation. The reward for a suspect was raised to $1,700, and that's like $25K in today's dollars. Groups of vigilantes prowled through the neighborhoods. Fun.
Yeah. No. It's not fun. It's like January 6th, but in your own house or neighborhood.
Yeah.
Now, when men were away, women would stay at the Hotel Grimm in downtown Texarkana for mutual safety. People started to buy guns and create their own lock systems. The Texarkana Gazette gave the masked murderer the name the Phantom Killer.
Less than a month later, on May 3rd, 1946, Katie Starks, who was 36, went to bed early and was lying in bed trying to sleep. Her husband, Virgil Starks, who was 37, was sitting in the sitting room listening to a radio show.
Katie had just asked Virgil to turn down the radio when she heard the sound of glass breaking and went back to the living room. She found Virgil in his chair bleeding, having been shot twice through the window in the living room.
Katie was trying to get to the phone to call for help when she was also shot twice. As she heard someone trying to enter the home through the back window, Katie escaped through the front door with a bullet stuck under her tongue, having broken her jaw and splintering several teeth. She managed to get to a neighboring home for help, and she survived. Virgil, unfortunately, did not.
Katie's survival story is quite harrowing. Wow.
Yeah.
WOW, sis. Now, over 30 police officers were shortly on the scene, setting up a blockade and questioning everyone in the vicinity. Bloodhounds tracked a scent going from the house to the highway, and it was thought that this was where the shooter had parked their car and then made their escape. Bloodhounds, I feel a culture corner coming on about dogs. Say what? There is sort of this black conspiracy theory that dogs are racist, and it's true that humans have employed dogs as partners and protectors for millennia, but there is an extensive historical use of dogs against racial minorities or
Yeah.
ethnic minorities, including during slavery, dogs were used to hunt escaped slaves. Dogs may not be racist, but they've been used in a racially biased, violent manner. So, in the context of Texas, plus Jim Crow South, and the employment of bloodhounds speaks to how terrified white folks were because there were people being murdered senselessly, of course. But it also speaks to the terror that not one source we used has stated inflicted on the black residents as a result of the fear felt by white people in their community.
Yeah. Police were reluctant to link this last crime to the previous attacks due to the nature of the location and age of the victims. Also, the weapon was a 22 caliber, unlike the weapon the Phantom killer had used, which was a 32 caliber. However, police still investigated this crime as if it was related to the others, and it has been linked to the story ever since.
Following the murder of Virgil Stark, state-of-the-art police equipment was shipped in from Austin, Texas, the big city, including a mobile radio station which allowed police to communicate via two-way radios, which was revolutionary at the time.
Wow.
So, yes, would you believe it? Now we're going to get into the investigation. What's next, Beth?
In the wake of the murders and no actual suspects, the Texas Rangers became involved in investigating the murders. The Texas Rangers and local vigilantes patrolled lovers' lanes. Some sat in cars as decoys, trying to lure in the killer, with others sitting in the bushes nearby, ready to pounce.
Another culture corner coming on. Shimmying into culture corner. So the Texas Rangers have a very racist and very xenophobic past. Not only do dogs have a racist history against black people in the United States, the Texas Ranger have a messy past, to say the least. That includes murder, terror, particularly in Texas. The link between racial violence and Texas law enforcement goes all the way back to the state's original police force. That's right, the Texas Rangers. They were once the most celebrated state law enforcement agency in U.S. history. But that's because history has been whitewashed and told by only some people. They were established in 1835. Popular mythology has long cast the Texas Rangers as the law and order good guys of the Old West, dealing out tough but much needed frontier justice. And, there's shows like The Lone Ranger, never saw it, but The Lone Ranger was actually black, by the way. Anyway, next, Walker, Texas Ranger, and novels like Lonesome Dove, never heard of it, reinforce the Rangers' heroic brand, masking the agency's troubling and notoriously violent history. Not only did Rangers engage in the suppression of indigenous people, like the Comanche, the recapture of enslaved Black people, and the raiding of Mexican communities. And they did all of this with overwhelming, unnecessary force, earning them a reputation as a ruthless gang of fighters whose methods blurred the line between law and lawlessness. So there you have it, folks.
There you go.
Okay, so Texarkana residents were on edge, and reports to police of prowlers in the area rose. The Texarkana rumor mill began churning out stories. A man who left town for a short time was alleged to be the killer, who had been captured and kept in secret by the Texas Rangers. Although I wouldn't put it past him, this one is a stretch. But this rumor was dashed when, the man came home.
Different residents that people found odd were rumored to be the killer, and the gossiping got so out of control that the local paper published an article telling folks that they would be told when the killer was identified. So basically, knock that shit off.
Get that shit out of here like it's basketball. So police did not help matters much when they told Texarkana residents to oil up their guns and keep them handy. Do people in Texas do that automatically now?
I don't
Is
know.
that
Probably.
Texas-ist? Um, so this resulted in some shootings and random gunshots heard throughout the town. To make matters even more confusing, at least 9 men made false confessions to the murders. Yeah, maybe the false confession thing is a thing for another day, but
Yeah.
that's unfortunate.
Okay. Police only had a few suspects and theories. A former German prisoner of war who allegedly threatened several nearby residents became a suspect but was cleared. Months went by and the killings stopped. By October of 1946, the Rangers left town.
Good riddance. So the FBI also left town, leaving the investigation in the hands of the local police. The only survivors provided scarce information about the killer. Jimmy Hollis thought he was white. Mary Jean LeRae thought he was black. And Katie Starks never saw her attacker.
Dr. Anthony LaPala, a psychologist at the Federal Correctional Institution in Texarkana, was asked to provide a criminal profile for the killer. Among other things that he said was that he believed that the killer was white because he stated, quote, "In general, Negro criminals are not that clever," unquote.
Ooh, but they didn't know about Fruit Loops. So,
Oh, jeez.
Arkansas State Police troopers noted that cars had been stolen on the nights of each of the attacks. One of the cars was located on June 28th, 1946, in a parking lot. Police stopped. That was just really funny. I'm sorry. Police staked out the car only to find the person returning to it to be a woman named Peggy Swinney.
Her husband, Ewell Lee Swinney, who was 29, then became the prime suspect in the Texarkana Moonlight Murders. He had a record, and his wife, Peggy, provided police with statements about how her husband was involved in the murders, and some of the information would have only been known to police.
But Peggy, the Schuyler sisters. So Peggy kept changing her story, and Ewell Swinney refused to give any statements. Ewell Swinney said he was innocent, and his wife recanted her confessions eventually. Peggy, as his wife, could not be made to testify against him.
The only evidence police had on Swinney was his wife's statements, and she was deemed an unreliable witness anyway. So all of the murder charges against Swinney had to be dropped. But because he was a repeat offender for car thefts, he was sentenced to 30 years to life for those offenses.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Trigger warning for suicide. Please leave the room or stop listening or fast forwarding.
Cover your ears.
Cover your ears, please. Protect yourselves. Take care of yourselves. On November 5th, 1948, 2 years after the murders, Henry Booker, a.k.a. Duty Tennyson, a young man of college age, committed suicide using cyanide and mercury. He left a suicide note that read, quote, "Why did I take my own life? Well, when you committed 2 double murders, you would too. Yes, I did kill Betty Jo Booker and Paul Martin in the city park that night, and killed Mr. Stark and tried to get Mrs. Stark," unquote.
Over time, though, police began to doubt the claims in the note. They found other notes that made fanciful claims, and friends and family told police that he liked to tell stories. A friend told police that on the night that Virgil Starks was murdered, they had actually been at home playing games, so he couldn't have been there.
So, according to his uncle, a forensic psychiatrist named Dr. John Tennyson, Duty had connections to all of the victims. Duty was allegedly an usher at a theater where he saw some of the couples and allegedly in the same band as Betty Jo. Also, one of his friends lived with the sister of Katie Starks, but all of this was alleged by Dr. Tennyson, and nothing could be confirmed.
In January of 1949, a 26-year-old black man, whose name we don't know, was arrested for the violent double murder of a black couple. The female had been sexually assaulted. The man had worked for Virgil Starks, who, as you know, is one of the victims, and he lived on Virgil Starks' property when the crime was committed.
So, although suspected, he was never charged with the Texarkana Moonlight Murders, but the man confessed to the murder of the black couple and the sexual assault, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment for those crimes.
Some people believe that the Zodiac Killer and the Phantom Killer are one and the same. The
Hmm.
Zodiac Killer is also an unidentified serial killer who plagued the San Francisco area in the 60s and 70s. Both were serial killers who mainly killed by shooting. They both attacked couples in secluded places, and on at least one occasion, the Zodiac Killer wore a hood.
No matter what era, society, people just love a good serial killer story. Am I
Yeah.
right? Whether it's in Texarkana or in the Bay Area in the 60s or 70s. So now we're going to get to where are they now? I'll tell you. Jimmy Hollis recovered from his skull fractures. He went on to marry and have 7 children.
Wow.
He obtained his Master of Science and was rumored to be working for NASA in Houston, Texas at the end of his life. He passed away in his sleep at age 54.
Mary Jean Larry did not fare so well. She suffered from what we now know as PTSD and ended up living in Billings, Montana, where she died of cancer in 1965 at the age of 38.
Katie Starks eventually remarried and became Katie Starks Sutton. She died at the age of 84 in 1994 and was buried next to her husband, Virgil. She was one of the last living victims involved in this case.
Ewell Swinney was eventually paroled in 1973, and he died in 1994.
In 2020, the FBI released declassified information related to this case, causing a resurgence of interest. There are about 1,000 pages of information related to this case on the FBI website in no particular order. Girl, it's a mess. Now, now we're going to get into what we think. We don't know who it is, so I don't know if we can talk about what we think made him snap, as well as our takeaways. So what do you got, Beth?
Yeah, so I was going to say, without knowing who the perpetrator was, it's hard to say what motivated this killer.
Mm-hmm.
But just going on the facts of the crimes, there was definitely a sexual motive. He may have been resentful of couples. David Berkowitz, the son of Sam Killer, also focused on couples, and he at one time said that his motivation was getting, quote, revenge on a world that he felt had rejected and hurt him, unquote. So maybe couples were a trigger. I don't know. And I thought it was interesting how the killer made the male victim take off his pants.
Yeah.
I don't really know what that was about, except for maybe it made he was subduing
Yeah, that
the
was my thought.
male
A way
victim.
to
Yeah.
a way to subdue the male. Kind of like what's that guy? The Golden State Killer who would put plates on the husbands?
Yeah. He'd have him lay down and put plates on him and say if he heard the plates move, he would kill him.
Yeah. I mean, think about in any other setting, if your pants are off when you are not terrified, no big deal. Take my pants off.
Right.
Come at me, bro. But if you're terrified and your pants are off, like I'm thinking, I don't even know if I would know what the next move would be
Right.
other
What
than
do I
to
do
try
now?
to survive. Yeah, it's like a weird switch. Pants off. Survival instincts, reptilian brain is all that's working right now. So anyway, that's my thought. I agree with you is what I'm saying.
And then I don't know if the Starks attack was related or not, but it is odd that it was another couple that was attacked.
Yeah, definitely.
So what are your thoughts?
Well, I can imagine that this was a terrifying time to be alive. Not only was it during Jim Crow, I don't want to go there, in the Deep South, but there was an unknown killer targeting white folks. So everyone was terrified, but not necessarily for the same reasons. The first 2 survivors differed on whether the perpetrator was white or black, but just that sprinkle of a detail. What did they run with? He may have been black, and that was enough to fuck things up as far as the safety of the black community in Texarkana was concerned. First of all, there were a lot of lynchings in Texas. From this time period, there were hundreds that were reported. So that means there were lots that were not reported during this decade. And it didn't take much for a lynching to go down. Just the thought in the imagination of a white person could be deadly for a Black person. And this case is like a casserole of horror. The Lover's Lane, the unsolved murders, the fact that the person seemed to stalk the victims and terrorize them before their death, make them take their pants off, the terror of the white community, the terror of the Black community. And this is still a mystery to this day, almost making it like legendary.
Yeah.
So where are the folks at Netflix or HBO? I'm manifesting this right now from this is how it's going to go. From the folks that brought you Watchmen and Lovecraft Country, Moonlight in Texarkana. Also, just in a thought I had was, this was a serial killer at the time, but at the time, this term serial killer didn't exist in the American vernacular. That's it for the story. Now we're going to talk about how not to get murdered. So, if you love true crime and you don't want to die, here's a tip for you.
This segment is not intended to be victim blaming. We thought of this segment because I read somewhere that a lot of people listen to true crime because they want to know what they can do to be safer. This is not meant to blame the victims. It's just learning from other people's experiences.
So I thought of these ones after looking into this case, and basically an emergency exit plan should be in place always, in every scenario, in your head, in a public space. Where are the exits? But lastly, if you park somewhere, make sure you are parked in a fashion so that you can get the fuck out right away if you need to, quickly, with as much ease as possible. Reverse into those spots, ladies.
Great idea.
Reverse into the spots. I think this might have been a very different story if the folks did that. So,
wow. Good tip.
Thank you. Now it's shout out time. We're going to shout out any content by or about any othered or marginalized folks or any true crime goodies. So I just wanted to shout out House of Secrets, the Barai Deaths on Netflix. This show's wild. Have you heard of it yet?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's about the deaths of 11 family members in Delhi. And it looks like it's a suicide because everybody's hanging, but could it have been a murder or something else? We don't know. I actually still don't know. I mainlined the first few episodes, but I don't know what happens in the end, but it's riveting. Huh? Yeah.
Okay.
What do you got?
So I wanted to shout out the podcast Legally Judgy.
Ooh, we got to connect with them. Can't forget that.
Yeah. Lawyers Alexa and Nicole talk about legal issues in pop culture. And I apologize, but I don't know which is which, but one is a white lady and the other is a woman of color. And it's really fun and funny. So give it a listen.
Color me subscribed. Oh, well, shoot. That's it for today, Beth. This has been fun.
Yeah.
Thank you all of you here at She Podcast for indulging us.
Yes.
For listening to us, for rocking with us. And since that's it, let's, Beth, tell the people where they can find us from here on out.
Our website is fruitloopspod.com. Our Facebook page is Fruit Loops Pod. And our discussion group is Fruit Loops Pod Discussion on Facebook. We are also on Twitter and Instagram at Fruit Loops Pod. And links to our sources will be in our footnotes. If you want to support the show, you can send us a donation on the Cash App. Just Google Fruit Loops Pod Cash App, or you can become a monthly patron through Podbean. This will help us pay for things like our website and pod hosting. There's no minimum and no commitment. Even $1 would help. And as always, we have merch for sale on our website.
That is all correct. Now, this is a weekly podcast and new episodes drop every Thursday. So until next time, look alive, y'all. It's crazy out there.